Good morning, Last City. Stanley here with you, and the Traveler once more brings us the good word of Bungie. And this week at Bungie, we have tactical balance updates to look at. Every light base subclass took a nerf hammer to the knee, and adding insult to injury, Stasis gets the buff frag. The Traveler also informed us that a new dungeon is on the horizon, as well as adjustments to neutral game abilities. There's quite a bit to cover, so let's jump into it. The first light-based subclass on Bungie's to-do list is Solar, with a focus on Restoration and Radiant. One stack of Restoration has its healing rate reduced from 25 to 20 health per second in the Crucible, and 50 to 40 in PvE. Likewise, 2 stacks have its healing reduced from 40 to 32.5 in PvP and 80 to 65 in PvE. Furthermore, neither effect will stack with healing rifts. The stronger heal over time will override the weaker one. Whereas Radiant offered too much without any drawbacks. To balance things out, our God Overlords will alter certain solar fragments to reduce Radiant's uptime. Ember of Torches will give Radiant an 8-second duration instead of 10, and that's not all. Ember of Torches now applies a -10 to Discipline, whereas Ember of Solace will now provide a 50% bonus to Radiant duration rather than the original flat 5 seconds. Next up on the chopping block are Gunslingers themselves. Goldie did Cade a little too proud with far too many 7th columns for our God Overlord's liking. To that end, Deadshot loses its bonus duration but gains a 15% damage resistance. Don't worry, Marksman, though rarely used outside of Nighthawk, also catches a stray, losing its 15% damage bonus. Not to be left out, Blade Barrage loses 2 of its 5 bonus projectiles and now releases a total of 20 knives instead of 24. I know what you're thinking, that's a lot of hunter adjustments. Fear not, Warlocks are also in the crosshairs for a buff! Celestial Fire's close range melee damage is increased to 100 from 90. No longer are these flaming AC-130s at a disadvantage up close. Now on to Void. Bungie identified a bug where overshields in PvE failed to provide their intended damage reduction. In Season 19, overshields will now provide the full 50% reduction, up from 25%, so in GM's Guardians will die a second slower than before. On the Voidlock side of things, Vortex Nova receives a buff. The projectile speed is increased by 21%, increased the radius of the inward pull on impact by 17%, and increased the inward pull strength upon impact by 20%. Not to be left out, Titan Shield bashes in Season 19 will apply suppression more reliably. Guess Super Melee registration was a little too much to ask for. Maybe in Season 20, this long-awaited improvement will occur. Until then, just spam them shield throws. And just when you thought Tether wouldn't get touched, maybe it'll finally be less suicidal to cast and actually suppress supers before they murderize you and your entire team? Nah, Tether gets a nerf to its duration. Deadfall duration is down from 12 seconds to 8, whereas Mobius Quiver's duration is reduced from 8 to 6. Meanwhile, non-hunter mains rejoice. Invis is being looked at for a future nerf. Nerf Void and Solar Hunters all you want, they're still better than spinning an electrified stripper pole at enemies that fail to register damage. Let's be honest, the last time Arc Hunters were great in PvP was back in Year 1. Speaking of Arc, the Touch of Thunderstorm Grenade is finally getting nerfed. Praise the God Overlords, yeah. Its base roaming duration is reduced to 4 seconds, down from 5. Yay! Furthermore, the bonus lifetime granted by Spark of Magnitude to the enhanced Stormnade is reduced from 2 seconds to 1.5. So don't worry, the Stormnade will still be powerful. At the very least, the friend or foe indicator of the Stormnade will be easier to distinguish now with a red ring persisting through its duration, as well as an added bonus to the effect of enemy Stormnades. Besides the OP grenade, Arc Titan supers performed below expectations in PvE. To help remedy this, ballistic slam damage against PvE combatants will be increased by 16%, whereas Arc Striders tear through PvE content with their silly builds. Despite this, a weakness in the class was still identified. Tempest Strike offered little benefit compared to Lethal Current and Flow State. Therefore, Tempest Strike's damage against PvE combatants is increased by 30%, though considering how powerful Lethal Current and Flow State are in Hunter builds, this probably isn't going to affect much. Not to be left out, Palpatine Warlocks receive an Arc Soul damage buff in PvE. It'll now deal 60 damage up from 35. Ball Lightning also gets a buff. Its range is increased from 27.5 meters to a flat 35. Once more on the PvE side of things, Chain Lightning's damage is increased by 50%. To complete the Warlock buff is a decreased Chaos Reach's cooldown, now 7 minutes and 35 seconds instead of 9 minutes and 35 seconds. With all of that covered, we're now in the final stretch. Second to last is stasis changes. In the past, Slow felt too oppressive to play against, but Bungie is dissatisfied with Slow's current state. Slow will now further reduce the movement speed of slowed targets by 10%. Meanwhile, Cold Snap was nerfed so bad in the past, it was afraid to even find slow-moving targets often enough. To help cure Cold Snap's trauma, it can now adjust its trajectory for 0.5 seconds after the creation to better hit targets. Another grenade relegated to useless status was Duskfield. To improve Duskfield, its slow stack application rate is increased by 13%. On the class-specific side of things, Stasis Hunters and Titans both receive buffs to their fragment slots. On launch, Stasis was far too powerful. We all have shared trauma due to that release. I know. That was painful. But now that it has all the potency of a snowball thrown by a toddler, it was time for a change. Winter Shroud's fragment slot is increased from 1 to 2, and Cryoclasm's fragment slot is increased from 1 to 2. With all these stasis buffs, Space Wizards also get in on the action. Glacial Harvest has its stasis shard creation cooldown reduced from 15 to 10 seconds. To cap off Shademinder's tweaks is a buff to Whisper of Rending. This fragment now provides bonus damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets for all primary ammo. In the past, this was limited to kinetic primaries. Finally, we have reached the end of our coverage with one last piece of information. A new dungeon is slated to release December 9th at 9 a.m. Pacific on the first Friday of the new season. Beyond this little tease, our god overlords decided to blueball us. So from all of us at Tower News, thank you so much for watching and have an amazing weekend.